Welcome to the World Beat Wednesdays. We're excited to have you join us today as we have a special guest. But before we get started, I have some sponsors I truly need to thank. Fisher Hayes, Joy, Allen CPAs, PGE, Salem Health, and Batteries Plus Bulbs. We want to thank them dearly for their continued support for the World Beat Festival. I also have a couple of announcements because we want to keep you in the loop here. World Beat Bash is up running live as an online virtual auction. We surely want to invite all of you to go check out the auction. The things that are for sale are for bidding right now. So please log into www.auctria.com/auction/World Beat Bash 2020. And that's one word, World Beat Bash 2020. The second thing I need to announce is to let you a reminder that this Friday is the first Friday Art Walk. It's the tradition here in Salem. So I encourage everyone, if it's good weather and you're willing to go out for a nice crisp walk around town, please do so. But I also wanted to add that the World Beat Gallery will be open during the Salem Art Walk from 5 to 8. We will also have a special guest at that gallery opening, who is also my special guest for today. I'm interviewing Fata Ariu Levi for a book he has authored, Navigators, Quest for a Kingdom in Polynesia. Welcome, Fata Ariu. We are excited to have you. I understand you recently just joined our community just at the beginning of the pandemic, and then we went into a full shutdown, which I'm sure you took advantage of that time to get things in order to have your book published, which I understand is just recently been published and up and running on Kindle as an ebook. So instead of worrying about that, let me just get to the meat of things. Why don't you share with our audience what the idea was behind the book?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you and your board members the whole idea of launching this book, The Navigators, Quest for a Kingdom in Polynesia. And really quite excited because of the Salem Multicultural Institute.
Right.
And, the World Beat seems apropos. Clearly the emphasis in diversity of cultures and the development of that is something that is very dear to my heart. And it actually speaks to the reason why I wrote this book.
Nice.
And being a native Samoan, it's important to note that the word navigators was a word that was coined by an explorer, a French explorer that is Antonio Bougainville, when he first discovered the island of Samoa and Manua. And actually the first one that actually landed and engaged. And he then recorded it in his diary and his log, and he coined it. This is the navigators of the archipelagos. And so today, whenever social scientists use that term, it actually referring to the Samoan. Mm-hmm. So I thought it would be great that I would resurface that term and perhaps brand it into my writing. And so this is the first book of 3. And I am, the Navigators' Quest for a Kingdom. And after they arrive there, it would be the second book, would be the Navigators Forging a Culture and Founding a Nation. And then finally, the last book is something that a lot of people don't know about, but these same navigators that came from Southeast Asia end up going back to where they came from. around the 1000 BC, and that after they received Christianity, they went back as missionaries to the Melanesian. So I thought that would be a great way to close the loop. They came from there. There were heathens, there were natives, and now went back as really soldiers of God, as missionaries for God. So the idea came about because when I first was asked by my family at large, these Samoan families are, very extensive. So they asked me to help out with the family, and that they wanted me to take on the leadership role of the families. And that means you have to take a chief titles. And since our family has this chief title, which is one of the senior orator for the island, it's a senior, one of two senior orators for the monarch of the Malietoa clan, and in fact, senior statements orators for the islands. So when I took on that responsibility, I felt the burden of having to relearn the culture, the language, and the whole norms and protocols of being a chief, and how to carry out the responsibility of being a custodian of the culture, the language, the family structure, the family genealogy, and the rest of the island population. So that really, so I spent a lot of years doing that in the quest to being a better, effective leader for the family. In that process, I thought, you know, as I look around, there were many, many studies. Pretty much each study has their own, each study of the mystery migration of the Polynesian to East Pacific were pretty much fragmented. And there's really no cohesive book, or other than you have to do your own personal study on it. And so the idea became fermented in my mind that perhaps it's really time for somebody to do a more comprehensive, meaning can we coalesce many of these studies and put it in a cohesive storyline that perhaps would help the current as well as the future generations of these Samoan that are scattered throughout the Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, America. There's a total of about little less than 1 million Samoans across the world, and they all reside within that geographical area, the Pacific, New Zealand, Australia, the USA, and a few in Europe. So the challenge, as I found out in my research, is that a lot of the Samoans that have that migrated into these countries, you know, they took on the English language as their first language, and subsequently their children became pretty much, you know, exclusively communicating in English. And so they are now at about the third generation in America, in Australia, New Zealand, and they're all asking the question to their grandparents or great grandparents, where do we come from? What is, you know, what is this Samoan culture? Is there a history that we could, a book that we can? So that is the challenge. And I thought that was an opportunity to perhaps do something that could allow these young people, the future generation, as a reference point. And So therein lies the beginning of the book. The challenge of the book was it covers such a very, very large geographical areas. And I also knew that I would be traversing through many sciences to try to collect evidence and coalesce them into a, a meaningful storyline. But it's a landmine because these are all scientific studies, and you don't just quote one and you leave the others, right? You have to be fair. And I also was concerned about, I didn't want, I wanted to be taken seriously. I am writing a history of a people. This is not my personal story. This is not a fiction. This is a historical. So I must conform to the academic standards, the academicians' work in terms of quoting them properly, the references. So, so I have to cover, obviously I have to trace the history, the migration path, and you don't start in the middle. You have to go back to where do these people came from that ended up in the Asiatic archipelago. So you can't avoid telling about the ancient migrations of human migration out of Africa. When they crossed the Nile into Levant, the Fertile Crescent, and then the migration from there to the Pontic steppes, Caspian steppes, onto the Eurasia steppes, and out of India, out of mainland China, out of the Asiatic archipelagos, which really the overall term that combines the Malayan archipelago as well as Indonesian archipelago. And then eventually they have to cross over what they call the Bismarck archipelago into Eastern Polynesia, the East Pacific Ocean, and onto the Eastern Pacific where they found themselves home.
So I know you've mentioned this is one of 3 books, but I just specifically want to focus on your very first book here. And I know you've touched a little bit. What is the purpose? What is the message to the readers from reading your book?
It's great. So you've seen the map. I have described, the out of Africa, the out of Levant, right? So I needed to at least be very specific to the path of how Polynesian in general and the navigators in particular. I didn't want to kind of like cover it in a high level without any specific information as to. So the message to the young people is that one of the oldest migration, which is the Polynesian migration across the Pacific Ocean, with the largest body of water in the world, 63.5 million square mile, right? And didn't just happen in the middle of the Pacific. You have to recognize it starts right from the out of Africa. So to gravitate and and navigate themselves through all of these continents down to where you see the Indonesian archipelagos just above the Australian line, right? And so there's the Samoans and their mythology said there was a reason why they were there. They came from somewhere. And the message is, comes to understanding your culture, understanding the development of your culture, understanding the path in which and all the evidence, whether it be linguistics, mythology, comparative cultures, the genetics, all of that you have to combine in order to build a case to convince the audience or the readers that this is something that a lot of scientists have documented, but at least Fata had put it together for us that we can just read and follow, And this is a gift to the young people, to the future generation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm documenting it. Like I said, it's not my story; it's their story.
Right.
It is the people's story, and that's another reason why you have to be very cautious about it, because you're telling a story of a people, of an ethnicity, and it's now a country, right? It's an independent country, right? And so you have to pay respect that it's their story.
Right.
Yeah.
I know this took, I've heard you say a lot of words there, such as linguistics, mythology, comparative science. I wanted to know, all that must have taken you a long time to organize and coordinate. Tell me about the background of this book.
Good. So I knew that the challenge was to take a deep dive into. I'm a historian by education, so I love to you can't just answer the question that is at the high level. You got to peel the layers of the onion, so to speak, down to the detail layer. And so my approach to writing this was, okay, let's just take a language. There's a question because a linguist back in 1841 had combined the Malayan language with Polynesian language. And there was an implication that perhaps the Polynesian language was a daughter of the Malayan language. It turns out the opposite, because when we looked at the migration path and the timeline, it said, no, the Polynesian actually arrived first at the archipelago before the Malayan came, almost 1,000 years. So how could that be a daughter and the Polynesian adopting the Malayan? And the other thing about language is that it doesn't say who's the child and who's the parent. It only looks at common words, common spelling, and somewhat similar meanings. That's it. So you have to take a dive. So you can't just leave it there. You have to take a dive. So I took a dive, and I found lots of references. Judge Formander out of Hawaii back in 1855, who did a treatise, a 3-book treatise on this. And I read it. I said, man, he's got something here. You have to look at the beginning of the language. When did that start? What would be the most ancient language? So all of the studies seems to point to the following: the Indo-European, the so-called, used to be called the Aryan language, that, and then, which really the foundation of all the language, the Greeks, the Romantic languages, and all of that came from other. But there was another language that is even older than that. It was called the Sanskrit. But the Sanskrit, this is the language that came out of the hymns in the Hindus, So, but there is a previous language to that, which is foundation to the Sanskrit, and that is the Rig Veda. And that language were the hymns, where it starts with, and by the way, the linguistic that, Indian linguistic that actually, linguists that came up with analyzing, dissecting the grammar was Panini. And he said that was really the first spoken words, was because it's a sound, but in the thought process, it means a prayer. There was an intellectual message that's being developed in there. So we had to go there. I had to go there. I had to find out where the valves began. Where the valve, it began in the sutra within the Rig Vedas and the Sanskrit. And so, what would be the oldest sentences ever spoken by man? Well, it turns out to be love I. So notice, it's the verb that first, right? And Abidan in the Samoan language, and alofatu, alofooi, it's still at the same. So when these people departed the area and went into the middle of nowhere and they became isolated, and they were isolated from diffusion from other culture, the language basically freeze at that. And they went ahead and did their own innovation and development for them to sustain it. So now I discover, no, the current structure, the morphological and phonology of this, and the grammar of the Samoan language, it's pretty much, frozen in time since the time they left this huge continent. So now I said, there is clear evidence now that the two languages, it appears that the Malayan might have borrowed the Polynesian words, as they were living together, neighboring. See, because that's how sometimes you inherit language, right? So if you could do that and you corroborated it with mythology, culture comparison, and the actual timeline of their arrival at different places, then you begin to see the pieces of the puzzle of their migration.
Now, I know this is taking you just real quick. How many years have you put into this book?
Way too many years. This is not something that you, again, Dr. Vui Toyutu, who is the author of the afterword of the book, said to me, he said, Fata, given the number of years that you became the chief and your studies, that you will end up, which is about, so it's 32 years since I became a chief, about 11 years of research.
Wow.
So he said, that's kind of equivalent to 3 PhDs. Yeah. But yeah, so again, it's something I wasn't, and I said it right on the book, early on in the book, I wasn't writing a thesis. I'm not doing a dissertation. I'm just telling the story of my people, and I needed to be very careful and be thorough at it and to be taken seriously by the academic world.
I just wonder if by chance, with the book now published and on Kindle as an ebook, I just wonder, do you feel like all those, as you went along planning, have you accomplished the goals that you wanted to accomplish in this book?
Well, it's an interesting question because the accomplishment is not my measurement. I don't have a yardstick. The only yardstick that counts is the people that I wrote for. They're the one that's gonna, and I'm waiting for that. Did I come close? Did I fulfill, metaphorically speaking, that I use in the book? Have I come close to quenching your thirst for the past? The message that I am a servant delivered from our ancestors to you. Did that do it? Is it working, right? And so, as Dr. Papali'i, who wrote the foreword, said, Fata, this book requires reading and rereading because it has it's a constellations of stars that every time you're thirsty for something, you can go back and reread it. And so, and to me, that I'm hoping that that might be um, the truth. That I would hopefully that I could quench somebody's thirst.
Nice. Well, I'm going to invite all of our viewers that later today or later when you view this Zoom, that you please comment below. We'll make sure that any comments or anything that do appear there, that they get to Fata. If you have a personal question you'd like to ask about the book, we'll make sure that he gets the question. But also, he actually has a website for the book. It is www.Navigators of the Pacific Ocean, as one word, .com. And there you can reach him directly, personal email and everything, and he'll be glad to have a conversation with you as well. And if you're a Twitter fan, he actually has a Twitter too. The Twitter handler is @NavigatorsOf, and that's OF at the very end, and as one word. I just want to express how grateful I am to have you here with us today, and I'm glad that you had this is actually his first interview about the book, and so we're excited to have been to partake in that and put him up there and let him know that we are glad he's a part of the Salem Multicultural Institute. He is a member of this community. Couldn't have been a better platform for him to introduce the book. So like I said, come Friday between the hours of 5 to 8 at the World Beat Gallery. He will be present there if you'd like to come down and meet with him. I will say that the gallery is hosting Japan. Thank you, everyone. A special thank you to the World Beat Festival Executive Director, Kathleen Fish, as well as a special thank you to the Assistant Director, Jacob Ermas, and I hope I said his last name correctly, but he's also our technical person this afternoon. And we also want to thank the opportunity from Salem Multicultural Institute, chaired by Kathy Andreas as the board, and Fata Ariu Levi. I look forward to book 2 and book 3, and you can find that book again on Amazon Kindle as an ebook. Paperback to come soon, and hardcover is to come soon as well. Appreciate your time. I'm Ava Kitty, your festival MC. I want to thank you all for joining us. Take care. Bye.